really thinking about. So I want to invite you to open your chat. We're going to use the chat feature a lot today. One of the things that we're going to be talking about is an interactive strategy to help you really leverage 2020 for a positive move forward. I actually just got back night before last from a 10-day trip, a live trip, if you can imagine it. I did 4 live in-person events in the last 10 days. It was I got to tell you, just between all of us, it was a little weird. It was weird to be standing on a stage. In fact, I laughed. The first event I did in Colorado. And when I went up on the stage, I was standing there and I was just doing this, what I'm doing right now. And I realized that I have been doing this into this camera with these lights and microphones and monitors and all that. I've been doing this for a year. It will be a year this week. In fact, ironically, I'm going to Vegas as soon later this afternoon to film Mondays with Mike. If you aren't a member, if you're not subscribed to Mondays with Mike, I encourage you to go to mikestaver.com and subscribe. And I'm actually going back to Vegas. It just dawned on me, actually, just now as I'm talking, that I am going to be back at the place. I did one of the last speaking engagements at the Wynn Hotel before they shut it down. So it is good to be here with you, but staring into a camera did kind of create a little bit of a habit. So we're going to take just about 40 minutes, and I'm going to share with you what I have studied over the last 12 months. And over the last 12 months, almost accidentally, when I was pulling out of Las Vegas, I said, if this lasts until April 1st, what was that, March the 12th? If this lasts until April the 1st, we'll be okay. If it lasts until May the 1st, we're going to be up a creek. And if it lasts much longer than that, we're going to be dealing with some pretty significant issues. Well, here we are. Here we are 12 months later, having dealt with all that we dealt with. But here's the great news. The great news is you have arrived. You are back. You are here. You have arrived at this place in time for some reason. So to get the party started, what I'd like for you to do in the chat, open up your chat if you would, and I want you in the chat to type the word that best describes what got you through 2020. Was it perseverance? Was it faith? Was it friends or family or what? What was it? Good. Flexibility, faith, teamwork, faith, confidence, God. Good. Good. Look who's here, John Davis. How are you, brother? Faith, hope. Good. Faith, God, perfect, awesome. Patience, good. Family, gratitude, patience. Now, what I want you to perseverance, faith, discipline, finding like-minded people, blinders, good, Jan. Positivity, creativity, awesome. Here's the thing I want you to notice. None of you said something technical. You all said something either mental or spiritual. What you're going to discover is that my research over the last year has shown me very specific things that have moved people forward. And so I want you to think, as we start to launch into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, I want you to sort of start applying these things to moving forward. And here's what matters. It matters because moving forward is what we need to be about right now. I fully believe that after the last week of being on the road, that things are changing and they're changing fast. But there are a couple of things I want all of us to get. The first thing is there's no getting back to normal. The fundamental tenets of how we operate as human beings and how we operate as a country have changed. And I don't think all of that is a bad thing. I think a lot of it is a good thing. The second thing I want all of you to get is that we are not all in the same boat. You know, I hear people saying all the time, we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same boat, we're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. And so we came through the storm, each of us in our individual boats, managing it differently. And so we're going to look today at how and what I've discovered with clients and family and others over the last 12 months. First of all, one of the first things that we learned is that perspective matters. What we know is that if we are going to be successful, we have to be people who have the right perspective. I was thinking the other day as I was driving, I don't know why this struck me, but weird things like this often do strike me. I thought, isn't it interesting that your windshield is 20 or 30 times larger than your rearview mirror? And you know why? Because if we're going to focus effectively, our perspective needs to be forward, not back. Our perspective needs to be looking in the rearview mirror, looking in the side mirrors to make sure whatever is behind us is we're not going to cause a problem. But the real focus is what we focus on going forward. And here's the dynamic of that spiritually and psychologically. The dynamic of that is that the brain has to focus somewhere. The brain has to engage in a target moving forward. And the reason that it does is because it informs the mind of which direction it needs to go. So there are two things I want you to keep in mind. You are either going to have a focus forward strategy, or you're going to have a focus away from strategy. Let me say that again. You're going to have a focus forward strategy or a focus away from strategy. A focus away from means I'm moving away from something. I'm trying to escape something. I'm trying to avoid something. A focus forward strategy says I'm moving towards something. Let me give you an example. Recently, I had a client say, man, I've really put on the COVID 20 pounds. I didn't really want to put it on, but I really put it on. And they said, he said, I'm really trying to lose weight. And I said, how's that going? And he said, well, it's a little bit of a struggle. I said, try something different. Try not thinking about losing weight, because that's something you're moving away from. Try instead about what you're moving toward. Are you moving toward a healthier lifestyle, better diet, better exercise? What are you moving toward? See, the perspective matters because what you focus on is where you move. I was in an accident. As many of you know, I was in a pretty bad accident on New Year's Day. I was riding my dirt bike in the desert. Now, I've ridden Harleys for a lot of years and motorcycles for a lot of years, but I haven't ridden a dirt bike in a long time and a long time. So I hired a guy to give me some lessons because I was going to ride the Barstow to Vegas motorcycle ride next Thanksgiving. So I hired a very talented, in fact, he's the Arizona motocross and desert champion, or was for some time. Note to self, when you're 60 years old, do not hire a 26-year-old to teach you how to ride a dirt bike. And so it was New Year's morning. It was cold outside. I was riding down a trail and the sun was right in my eyes. The sun was just coming up. You have those days where the sun's blinding. You're kind of sure you're going to hit somebody. And I noticed that all of a sudden the sun got blocked out by him, my trainer. I was following him down the path and he went up on a hill and he blocked out the sun. I went, oh, there's a hill. Now, it wasn't a very tall hill. It was probably 6 feet, 10 feet, 8 feet. I don't know how tall it was. But as I approached the hill, I gave it a little bit of acceleration. We're only doing like 10 miles an hour. I gave it a little bit of acceleration. I got to the top of the hill and I got thrown to the ground like you can't believe. I hit the ground so hard, it ripped my face mask off, it ripped my visor off, and I broke my arm. I had to have reconstructive surgery on my arm. Here's the moral of the story. The moral of the story is this. When he came back, and it didn't hurt, by the way, at first. It didn't hurt until I grabbed the throttle and I saw the bump on my arm. But he said something that I'll never forget. He said, Mike, I think the reason that you had the accident, but you always drop dirt bikes. That's just part of it. Not street bikes, but dirt bikes. He said, your focus was where your tire was and not where you wanted to go. How about that? He said, your focus has to be on top of the hill. Your focus, your perspective has to be on the destination that you want to get to, not where you are in the moment. And I don't know if that was true or not, but it made a lot of sense. I know what he said was true. I don't know if that's what I did. But if I was looking down at the base of the hill and I wasn't looking at the top of the hill, it's likely I'm going to enter the hill without perspective. You see, your focus wants to be forward, right? Forward focus. Just remember, focus forward fast, focus forward fast. The impact of the year matters. The second thing that I want you to think about in terms of the description of 2020 was that the impact matters, and I don't want you to underestimate it. I probably spend 80% of my time now with clients talking about the psychological, social, physical, or emotional impact, of 2020. I want you to think about this. For the last year, you have gotten up every single day with something in your environment telling you who's sick, who's dying, and how many people are going to the hospital. After a while, that has an impact. And so what I want us now to start thinking about is not ignoring what's behind us, right? That's why we have the rear view mirrors on the sides of our car and on our windshield. What I want us to do instead is use that as a reference because the impact matters. Caring for yourself and having self-care for yourself and those around you is important. The final description I want us to think through before we jump into the lessons is this. The way you explain the year ultimately determines the degree of optimism or pessimism that you have. The way you describe the year, the way you explain the year, ultimately will impact the kind of pessimism or optimism you have for the future. Let me share with you for just a moment the difference in optimism and pessimism. It doesn't have to do with how enthusiastic you are. It doesn't even have to do with how positive you are. It has to do with how you explain things. You see, when something negative happens, the optimist explains the negative things as temporary. And even though this has lasted a year, and even though it's still a significant issue for our country, the fact is it is a temporary state of being. The optimist explains positive things that happen in their life as a sign of good things to come. So let me say that again. The optimist explains negative things that happen in their life as temporary, as a for now strategy, as looking at things in a way that creates a space whereby you see the negative thing as having a limited duration. The optimist sees something positive happen as a sign of good things to come. The pessimist sees the negative thing as a sign of bad things to come. And so what I want to invite you to do is start framing your life and framing your world and framing your environment in terms of negative things being short-lived and positive things being a sign of good things to come. You see, just that shift in your filter matters a whole lot. So I want you to think about that as we jump into the lessons we're about to talk about, because I have discovered that there are certain things that are really critical. And here are the 4 lessons that my study and my personal life and my work with clients and my work in the culture have taught me over the last year. And then I'm going to break these down for you so that we have a solid plan going forward. Number 1, life can and will change in a minute. As obvious as this sounds, and all of you in this event know that this is true. And I don't want you to take that as a cliche. I want you to think about the reality of what that means in terms of your daily life, in terms of your relationships, in terms of your engagement, in terms of your walk through your life and through your culture. The second thing the lesson that I learned this year and that I realized that my study of folks taught me was some things and some people are temporary, and they should be. Last year was a tumultuous year on a lot of levels. There was a political stormy seas. There were socio-cultural stormy seas. There were physical and psychological and health-wise stormy seas. And some of you might have lost some friends. Some of you may have lost some family members. Some of you, I don't mean lost in terms of death. That would, of course, be extraordinarily tragic. What I mean is that some of you actually saw relationships change in the last year. I had dinner last night at a restaurant here in town, and one of the gentlemen who was at dinner with us said, I have not seen my grandkids in 1.5 years. That's a long time not to see your grandkids. And so what I want you to think about is this idea that some things are and people are temporary, and they need to be. The third thing I want us to, the third lesson I learned this year is that you, every one of you on this event right now, are more resilient than you think you are. You know, a year ago, had I told you, hey, in a couple of weeks, you're going to be wearing masks, locked in your house, running out of toilet paper, not able to see anyone, and not able to eat in your favorite restaurant for 6, 8, 9, or 10 months, depending on where it is that you live, you would have said, there's zero chance. I guarantee you that is what's going to happen. Some of you would have thought, I don't know how I can get through the year that way. And I want to share something with you, and I don't mean this in a flippant way at all. I want you to actually hear it for the compliment that it is. You have gotten through every single thing that's ever happened to you in your life. You ever thought about that? The evidence is that you're here. The folks that are here right now have proven that you are the evidence that you are more resilient than you think you are. And then finally, staying focused on what matters. Think about that. Staying focused on what matters. A lot of times what we do when there's a lot going on in our lives is that we have significant amounts of distraction. We have significant amounts of things that cause us to look over here and look over there and be distracted up there and over here and over there. But the fact of the matter is, focus matters. My broken arm is proof that focus matters. I was at my surgeon's office yesterday, I'm having a little bit of range of motion issues in this arm. And I'm now, what am I? I had surgery on January the 10th, so you can do the math. And what he said was very interesting to me. I go to therapy every Wednesday. They work on my hand. And he said, Mike, the way you focus your exercises and the use of your right hand is going to matter. I didn't know this. Maybe you did. Did you know that if you have an injury in your body somewhere, particularly if it's an extremity, if it's your hands or arms or legs or feet, he said, if you don't use it, for instance, right now I don't have a brace on it. He told me not to wear the brace anymore, so it's a little achy. He said, but if you don't use it, your brain actually locks down and starts to forget about it because it's not being used. So what you focus on, the things that you allow your mind to focus on matter. Some of you have heard me say this previously, but I want you to hear me say this, very, very important. Whatever your eyes see and your ears hear is what your brain uses for nourishment. Whatever your eyes see and your ears hear is what your brain uses for nourishment. And that's not a cliche. I mean, literally, your eyes and your ears are the windows to what your brain consumes. So let's just say you eat a healthy diet, you don't smoke or drink, and you take pretty good care of yourself overall. What we found, what we've experienced, what we've discovered is that as your eyes see images and as your ears hear sound, your brain processes that. And it uses the energy of your brain either for good or bad, like Superman's father said, right? Only use your powers for good. So what this notion of focus means is that you've got to determine what matters, right? What are you putting in your eyes and in your ears so that what are you allowing your eyes to see and your ears to hear such that it lifts you up as opposed to distracting you or making you feel less than you can be. So let's break these down, all right? We're gonna start breaking these down. I'm gonna break all four of them down so that we can launch in together. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll answer them as we go. Number one, life can and will change. Duh, everybody knows that, right? We all know life can and will change. But here are the three things that I have seen that people have done extraordinarily well during 2020. And they've done this in a way that has made them more effective at managing life's changes. So whether it's a simple thing like you're moving to a new house, or excuse me, you've got a new career, or whether it's a massive change like your health conditions or your life conditions or anything like that, I want you to know that there are three things that are going to drive that. The first thing is this: be present. And what I mean by present is be as much in the moment as you can possibly be. Be as much here as you can possibly be. Be as much dialed into what is happening in front of you as you can possibly be. We have distractions all the time, don't we? I mean, this thing is a distraction. It can also be an asset to you. I was waiting yesterday at the Mayo Clinic and I was reading a book that I like from this. So it's helpful. But what I want you to think about is this notion of not being present causes your brain not to focus on what's right in front of you. The second thing I want you to think about is this: be choosy about what and who you associate and affiliate with. And what I mean by that is this. I said be choosy, not snobby. One of the things that happens in life is that our lives are nourished, our lives are replenished in categories. They're replenished physically, they're replenished emotionally, they're replenished spiritually, they're replenished psychologically. And this replenishment of our souls and our minds and our bodies is critical to you being able to handle the inevitability of life change. But sometimes we're not that choosy. Sometimes we're not that present. And the reason that we're not is because so many things come at us all the time. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you right now to consider, where's an area in your life where you could be more present? Where's a place you could be more present? I was having lunch a couple of weeks ago with someone, and I noticed that during lunch, they were looking all around, and it was kind of like something was going on behind me. Have you ever had a conversation with a person like that, where something, like you're trying to make eye contact with them and you're like feeling like you gotta, because they're looking all around? That's a great example of not being fully present. So I'm going to ask you, of these three, which of these do you think would give you the greatest navigable channel in your life. Being intentional means this, that you don't do things by accident, that when you do what you do to drive your life forward, you're intentional. You have intentionality around the things that matter. You have intentionality about how you spend your energy. You have intention about who you surround yourself with. Good, Joanne, be more present, especially when my husband's talking to me. That's funny. Yeah, be more intentional. Hey, Lori, it's good to have you here. Being more intentional. Who else? What are some others when you look at these three that you think, wow, you know what? Good. Put down my phone when I'm with my family. So important. Be more present, Heather. Thank you for that. Really, really great. Definitely be more intentional. And so I want you to start thinking about, what does that mean behaviorally? Thank you, John. Hey, John, good to see you. Choosy, be present. Great. I want you to start thinking about the tangible behavioral ways you can do that. Like, what are the ways? Because here's what happens. Conceptually, we tend to get what we get, right? Conceptually, we tend to understand. But what we have to do is tie off to behavior. We need to tie off to the behaviors and the activities that will manifest themselves in being present, being choosy, or being intentional. For me, intentional is mine as well. I know that knowing that life will change, that things will happen, makes me need to focus on being more intentional, so that I'm not just going about my day accidentally sort of bumping around doing things, but that I'm actually on purpose. And we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. Let's go to the next lesson. And the one that I think will have a significant impact. Some people and things are just temporary in your life. And that's the way it's supposed to be. The other day, I listened to a speaker. His name's Alan Weiss. He's absolutely brilliant. He's one of my favorite human beings in the whole world. In fact, he had a huge impact on me building my business 20 years ago. He wrote a book called $1 Million Consulting, 64-time New York Times bestseller. I mean, the guy's really something. And he said something that I never really considered, and I want to share it with you. And so Alan Weiss was speaking, and he said this: ambiguity and temporary things are a necessary part of your life. Ambiguity is a necessary part of your life. It's going to be with us no matter what. And I want to lean into that, because what I've learned over the last year is this: those people who understood that life is fluid, that business is fluid, that some people come into our life for a season and then they're out, is a necessary part. Some people come to stay. Some people come to visit. It's a little bit like company, right? It's a little bit like your family. All of you probably have people in your life, friends or family, that you really love and care about, and you love to spend time with them temporarily. Some of you are in significant relationships where you found a life partner or that kind of thing, and you're like, I really love spending time with this person. But you may have some friends that come over and spend time. You're like, I really like spending time with them for 2 hours or for 1 hour. I know a person right now I can think of, I love talking to them for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, I'm thinking this ought to be a little bit more temporary. So what do we do with this lesson? What do we think about when it comes to this lesson? What we think about is this: that we need to accept the fact that temporary is okay. I heard this phrase one time. I think you guys will love this phrase. Just because it's over doesn't mean you failed. Isn't that interesting? Finished doesn't equal failure. Finished doesn't equal failure. One of the things I studied this year were people who were able to, in the course of their life, in the course of the transition, to be a force to go forward. I love that, John. Life is a train ride with lots of stops. Some get on, some get off. Dude, you should put that on a t-shirt. That's awesome. The fact is that that's exactly right. That is exactly right. And so what I want us to think about is which one of these areas is for you. See, planning for it means I accept the fact that this is part of the journey. But here's the part that I love the most, and that's the anticipation of renewal. You see, when things in our lives are temporary and they go, we may grieve them, we may be sad about them, we may not want them to be temporary, but they are. But here's what it does. It creates a space for renewal. It creates a space for rebirth. It creates a space for a new relationship Let's just say in your business, you are managing a team of people. Many of you are leaders here on this call or in this event, and you have somebody working for you. Let's say it's a sales associate that's working for you, and you look and you think, wow, they're really good, and they go. This morning, I always believe that I'm always given a gift before I do these events. And this morning I was given a gift, and the gift was a story that somebody told me, and they had lost a top producing person in their organization, and they it was right before the holidays. They had lost this top producer in their organization, and they were grieving it. They were sad. They were like, this person was with us for 15 years, and they produced a lot of revenue, and so on and so forth. And I said, listen, I said, first of all, let's just accept that just because they were finished with your company, it doesn't mean anybody failed. Could mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. The second thing I want us to think about is this. There's now an opening. There's now an opportunity for renewal. Where in your life might there be gaps? Where in your life might there be places where there once was something, some event, something where there isn't anymore? I'll give you an example. I turned a certain age last year. I turned 60, if you can imagine it, in October. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Mike, you don't look 60. You look more like you're 80, but I'm really only 60. But I've traveled a lot. That's my challenge. And so what I was thinking about when I turned 60 was there are certain things that are over in my life. I made a list of 10 things on the morning of my 60th birthday that I hadn't done in my life yet that I wanted to do. I'm ticking those things off my list. Not a bucket list. Those are things I want to do before I die. These were things that I had never done that I wanted to do. And now I'm not going to ride the Barstow to Vegas desert ride through the heart of the desert, right? My doctor said, you don't want to re-break it, blah, blah, blah. So that's temporary. The pursuit of that ride, that dirt bike, all that is gone. The equipment is gone. Still have my Harley though. That's gone, but that's okay, right? Now I anticipate renewal. What is the gap that's now available that is prepared for something new and different? Perhaps that's the way it is for you. Perhaps it's that way in your job. Perhaps it's that way in the way you've navigated 2020. What is the opening for you now? What is available to you now? Where is there a gap, or where is there a spot that a person or an event or a job or a condition or a status is no longer in your life, but now there's an opportunity for renewal? You see, that's the thing about perspective. Remember I said I learned this year and from my clients and friends and colleagues and the research that we did that perspective matters. That's the thing that matters in a big way. So it could be a job, it could be a health status, it could be a lot of things. But what we want to look for is what is the opening for renewal? What is the opportunity for you in the middle of that? Because in that moment of renewal, in that moment, which is largely, by the way, a mindset, in that moment, things start to happen. Let's talk about this. One of the things that I really studied a lot, and I probably studied it more for me than I studied it for anybody else, was I started studying this idea of resilience. There's a lot out there on resilience. If you haven't I think the book is called Grit. If you haven't read that book, it's a great book, should read it. A lot of research on resilience. But one of the things I paid a lot of attention to last year was I paid a lot of attention to this idea of who was moving through it, who was kind of stuck, who was kind of getting their knees buckled a little bit under them. How did that work? And so I started looking at three fundamental things that I started measuring in people. The first thing I looked at was, are resilient people more likely to lean into challenge? Right? Are resilient people more likely to work toward mastery? And are they more accepting of the concept that easy isn't the road? And as I started talking to people and listening to people and interviewing people, whether they're in my coaching practice or otherwise, I started to realize that these three things were largely present. The more resilient a person was, the more likely they were to have challenge, to lean into challenge, the more likely they were to try to figure it out and achieve mastery, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the more likely they were to shun or disregard the notion that easy is better. So let's look at these for just a minute. Dr. Carol Dweck studied growth mindset and fixed mindset. The growth mindset is the mindset that says, I'm here to learn, I'm here to study. I'm here to ask questions. I'm here to explore. The fixed mindset is the mindset that says, I'm really about having the answer, delivering the answer, being more about the answer. One's not better than the other, but what we know is that a growth mindset is more pliable. It creates a space for us where we're more likely to be effective. And so I want you to think about these three things. And one of the things that Dr. Dweck said was that people with a growth mindset tend to lean into challenge. They don't just notice it. They don't just work hard. They tend to see it and lean toward it, not lean away from it. They tend to move in the direction of the challenge, not away from it. That doesn't mean we invite the challenge, although sometimes we do, but it means that when I see it, I don't really pause and avoid. I start leaning into that challenge so that I can explore it. That's what people do when they're in a learning methodology or when they're thinking that way. So what about you? What are some challenges in your life right now that you could lean into? Might be something as simple as losing weight. Might be something as simple as getting your purpose, getting more, well, that's pretty complicated, getting in alignment with your purpose. But what I know is that all of us have challenges in our life that if we leaned into them a little bit more, we'd get a little bit more leverage. If we move toward those things a little bit more, we'd get a little bit more leverage. So what is that challenge for you? Where is that for you right now? What lies in front of you? Yeah, Pamela, I feel you. Physical therapy, that's exactly what I need to lean into for sure, and you as well. What are some other things? What are some other challenges? Leading without authority. I don't have a title, but as I lean, I am finding I can lead the team without authority. Awesome. Recruiting is a challenge you want to lean into, John. I love that, Joanne. Yeah. So what other challenges? Think about that. What are some interpersonal challenges? Some of you maybe need to lean into the way you communicate, the way you play well with others, the way you frame things. Maybe some of you have gotten a really positive or not as positive as you could be and need to lean into the challenge of being more optimistic. I don't know what it is, but I know every single one of us, every one of us right now has to get ourselves wrapped around the idea that leading into challenge matters. Let's talk about working toward mastery. With all that's coming at us and all the noise and all the distractions and all the things that are happening, it is difficult to work toward mastery. Have you ever met somebody who had mastered something? Have you ever sat in the presence of somebody who had mastered how to play a musical instrument or how to speak in public or how to negotiate or how to present in a debate or how to play tennis, or doesn't matter. Anything around mastery. And what we need to get is, you notice I didn't say here achieving mastery. I actually think mastery is a little elusive. I think that if we're going to be effective, what we have to be able to do is work toward that mastery. But here's what it requires. What I've learned is that it requires an intense focus on the thing that we want to master. We can't just dabble in it. We can't just walk toward it. We can't just move around it. We have to see it. Remember earlier I said be intentional? I said part of what I learned about the path forward is going to be to really be intentional. And so let's think about that for just a minute. Where is an area in your own life where mastery would be something you'd want to lean toward? It could be a soft skill like communication or negotiation, or that it could be a sport. It could be a skill at work. It could be, I don't know what it is. But what I know is that part of being intentional on the path forward is being able to work towards something that you can master. And being able to do that requires study, requires focus, requires practice. Here's why it matters. It matters because we live in a world of generalists. We largely live in a space of generalists. And when we can start achieving mastery in an area of our life, and we can say, I am going to focus on that thing, whatever that thing is, then that is the thing, or that is the process, or that is the way of being that I want to make sure I can master. And then finally, the path forward is going to require that we discard the idea or the belief that easier is better. Now, I'm not saying we should go out looking for trouble, and I'm not saying we should go out looking for difficulty. What I am saying is we should be really successful. And so what you want to think about is you want to think about where in your life do we believe that things should be easier? And I think that's okay. I mean, I think it should be easier to go to Hawaii, but I got to get a negative test. I got to get my temperature taken. It's not that easy, but that's the way it is right now. And Jan, to your point, I don't feel like I've mastered anything. I always feel like there's more to learn. There is always more to learn, but here is the caveat that I'll give all of you. And thank you, Jan, for bringing that up. And that is this: if you don't look for an area where you can achieve mastery, you will have a tendency to chronically feel like you're not quite measuring up. You're not quite there. In other words, there's always that pursuit of something else. In the real estate business and in the sales business, I call it deal junkies, right? Where they're only as good as their next deal. They're only as good as the next thing that they're accomplishing. They're only as good as the next thing that they're after. And what I know is that if we're going to be successful, we have to be able to be successful at driving that psychology forward. So if you pick one thing, I want to master communications. I think, John, you said earlier, recruiting. I want to be the best talent recruiter in all of the marketplace. If you want to master professional speaking or teaching or coaching or parenting or tennis, it doesn't matter. What matters is teaching the brain how to focus more effectively. Well, let's look at the next lesson and how that lesson will have a long-term impact. Focusing on what matters. And I should have put focusing on what matters most. Focusing on what matters most. There are only three things: be purpose and values driven, eliminate the insignificant, and create relentless focus. Do you see a theme here? The path forward is going to create for us ways that we can be relentless. Now, let's look at these three: be purpose-driven and be purpose-oriented and values-driven. The thing that is important is that you have clarity around your core values and your purpose. In other words, what are you here for? What is as Steve Jobs says, what is the meaningful dent you are here to put into the universe? All of us have a reason for being. It's what the French call the raison d'etre. The raison d'etre is a reason for being. And when you show up every day, and when you go to work every day, and when you interact with people you love and care about every day, are you purpose-driven? In other words, is there a method to your life that says, here is what I am here to do? It could be something simple. For me, it's really simple. It's to have a positive impact on as many lives as I can before I, transition. That's it. Have a positive impact on as many people as I can and help them live better lives while I'm here. That's it. And there are a lot of things I do that are purposeful, but that's the primary purpose. And then the next thing you want to think about is, what are your values? What drives you from a values perspective? That is to say, how are your values integrated into your life? Not just do you have them, because of course you must have them. Of course and we all do, by the way. Those of you who are, and I know several of you are here from, that were in Maestro. And what we realize all the time is that when we show up in our lives, when we're values oriented, it's important. But the identification of the values isn't enough. You notice I said you have to be values driven. It's the fuel, it's the manifestation of the thing in you that creates the energy and momentum to move forward. Secondly, is eliminate the insignificant. There's a lot of things in life that are insignificant. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay attention to them, right? I'm not saying that they don't matter. I'm just saying that they're insignificant in our lives. So what I'd like you to do in the chat, we haven't done this in a minute. I'd like you in the chat to put in there some examples of things in life. Maybe it's in your life. Maybe it's in a friend's life. Examples of things that are insignificant. Let me give you an example. Watching the news, insignificant probably. Drama, insignificant. Worry, insignificant. Ignore noise. That's right, Patrick. Well done. Being on social media, insignificant. Watching the news and getting caught up in politics, Kim, insignificant. That's right. What else? What other things can you think of that are insignificant? And yet they tend to create Yeah, social media, news, gossip, worry. Thank you, Paula. As you said, jealousy, worrying about what I can't control. Brenda, that's a huge one. Any political conversation. That's right, Eileen. Very not letting go. You know, Mona, that's a very good one. I hadn't thought about that. But holding what other people think of you. Great. The weather. That's right, Jill. What others are doing. Good, Austin. That's exactly right. So what I want you to think about, the color of the lamps in the bedroom. That's a problem. So, but that's funny, Joanne, that you said that. Too much time figuring this out. There is too much time focusing on the insignificant so that it doesn't free us for the significant. And the path forward is going to require us to set things aside. Recently, I was having a conversation. It was after the election, and I was having a conversation with somebody who was very passionate about the election. The election was over, and it was all settled, sort of. And I remember listening to this person with a lot of passion and heat around what they believed about the election and about the future of our country. And I remember feeling like I wanted to say something about it, right? Like I just had this impulse or this urge to weigh in, not with an opinion, but with a question. And I realized that if I did that, if I spent any time at all doing that, it wasn't going to make any difference, and it would be insignificant, and it would just make things bigger. But that didn't mean I didn't want to. And so I'm going to ask you to think about this. How can you really focus right now on things that aren't significant, on the distractions or the noise? That's right. I would have just fed into that person's drama. That's exactly right, Paulette. So I want you to think about that in your own life. Where are some things right now when you go through life and you go through your day and we start moving forward? Remember, our focus is forward. Focus forward fast is our mantra going forward. And I want us to start thinking about, what would my life need to let go of? What would the drag be in my life of the insignificant? It could be giving too much emotional power to somebody else. You ever had a person that said something or did something or kind of hit a hot button? Maybe that's insignificant. The need to change another person, insignificant. Those things are things that will, when eliminated, clear the deck for you. And then finally, to have a sense of relentless focus. That is, being able to find yourself in a place where your focus is such that you can move forward effectively. So be purpose-driven, right? What on earth am I here for? Why did I land on the planet? What is the meaningful dent that I'm here to put into the universe? I had a coaching client one time. Their whole meaningful dent was around a product that they had developed that was in market that they did a great job for. So they had a more kind of science approach. Other people have. I was yesterday in a meeting with somebody who helps developmentally, has what am I trying to say? Day programs for developmentally disabled adults. They have all over the valley in Arizona where they take care of and help these folks really learn and understand how to have their own sense of purpose and certainty. That is their relentless focus that drives their purpose and their values. So I want you to think about that. So where we've come today, I'm going to back the truck up here a little ways, and I'm going to look at these lessons again. Life can and will change in a minute. Some things and people are temporary. You are more resilient than you think you are, and staying focused on what matters most. I'd like you to look at one of these four and ask yourself, if I was really going to make a commitment for the rest of the year this year, if I was really going to move downstream, so to speak, and really have an impact, which of these do I need to adopt? And I'd like you to put them in the chat for me so that I can sort of get a sense. The last one, David, saying focused on what matters. It's really good. Good, Jennifer. Yeah, life can and will change in a focus on what matters. Thank you, Jan. Yeah, Amanda, focus on what matters. Focus. Stay focused on what matters. Stay focused on what matters. Now, all of you, well, it seems to be the one that landed. Maybe we'll do our next one on how to stay focused on what matters. I want you to think about this. Remember that focusing on what matters is both internal and external, right? So what that means is focusing on what matters, good, Bill, focusing on today. Focusing on what matters is on the inside too. When you have thoughts come through your head, does it really matter? Is that thought really going to have an impact? Is it going to fulfill your purpose, move your values forward, make you a better world citizen? Is it going to create that space for you or not? Thank you, Diane. Resiliency, exactly. And so I want you to ask yourself, as we start to wrap it up today, which of these could you take today? Take a screenshot of this, write it down, whatever note you're taking. It's being recorded. We will send you the recording of this. And ask yourself the question, what behavioral commitment could I make today? So if you're focusing on today, if you want to stay focused, if you want to focus on what matters, if you want to be more resilient, what are the behaviors that need to happen? And here's what I want you to think about. And I'm happy to take any questions if you want to put some questions in the chat about a specific set of circumstances or a specific thing you're dealing with. Happy to, answer them in the last 5 to 7 minutes. But here's the thing. Understanding these core 4 is about tying the insight that you have to the behavior change you're committed to in little tiny increments, right? So mine, for me, is staying focused on what matters. And right now, I've got a lot of things going on in my life, a ton of really positive things, some not as positive. And so what I know is that I've got to manage what's going on the inside before I can manage what's going on the outside. And so if a thought comes to your mind, or if an impulse comes to your mind, or if something comes to your mind, the work is really about making the shift away from that, right? And saying, does this matter right now at this space and time? Now, let me take you back to when we started the event today. Remember I said you're either moving away from something or you're moving towards something. So if you begin to experience something internally that isn't what matters, you don't want to move away from it. You want to move toward what matters, right? So I'm not moving away from what doesn't matter. I'm moving toward what matters. And by definition, by default, I start moving away from that. So a couple questions came in. One of the questions is, Mike, where's the best place to start? I'm assuming you're asking of these 4, but I would start with the one we talked about earlier, and that was perspective, right? Managing your perspective. And I think that being able to do that, being able to drive that is really, really, really critical. So I would start there. I would start with just managing my perspective and choosing one of these 4 that can really move your year and begin to accelerate momentum. I think, let me see, another question here. Mike, how far in advance should I be planning? That's a great question. Well, I don't know if you own a business or work in a business or you work from home. I don't exactly know your situation, but here's what I know. I am not planning anything in my business any longer than 60 to 90 days. I don't have a 1-year plan. I certainly don't have a 3-year plan. And I would never even think about having a 5-year plan. So in your business and in your life and in your family, I don't think I'd go any longer than 90 days max right now because things are changing so fast. And I think that's really, really an important piece of this puzzle so that you can make absolutely certain that you're executing on these things really, really well. A lot of you jumping in the chat, giving me ideas about where you're going to start, developing emotional intelligence, reassess, assure moving forward what matters. Yeah, fork in the road kind of thing, completely get that. Here's my invitation to you. I invite you to really make a commitment today to be able to do the things necessary to achieve movement forward. Remember, movement forward by adjusting perspective, understand that things are temporary, focusing on what really matters, and not doing it resentfully, not going, well, that doesn't matter. Just I'm moving. Remember, this no longer matters. I'm moving toward something that matters in a big way. Yeah, Frank, the slides are available. They'll be in the recording, actually, and you'll get the recording by tomorrow. If you'd like the slides themselves, you can send an email to info@mikestaver.com. It's info@mikestaver.com, and somebody on my team will make those available to all of you. We're going to start doing these sessions regularly. You are now in the loop on that, and so I don't know what regularly looks like. I'm thinking every couple of weeks, and to continue to help us build momentum going into 2021. And so I think that being able to do that affects, look at Kenna. Hey, Kenna, how are you? Yeah, I could be in the pit crew. That's right. All right, y'all. Love and health to all of you. Focus on what matters. Do what you need to do to create that life. And I'll look forward to seeing you in just a couple of weeks. So stay tuned because we're going to be doing some other things as well. You're all very welcome. I appreciate every one of you for taking time out of your day. Take care.